This is a story about a very special friend of mine called Sedgwick Alexander the Third. Sedgwick, Sedgy to his friends, comes from the former kingdom of Yugoslavia, and he is marvellous. He is also one of the world's most celebrated imaginary friends. Indeed, the King of Yugoslavia himself presented Sedgy with a very large trophy, a golden certificate and a humongous badge for over 100 years of service. Now, I think Sedgy's story is one of my most important stories because it demonstrates that Irish children are without doubt the very best children in the world. Once upon a time, in Yugoslavia, where Sedgy was living as best friend to a young girl called Ivana, and they were both playing Barbie dolls, don't tell anyone, a terrible thing happened. Bombs began to fall. Bombs began to fall on Sedgy's beloved city of Dubrovnik. They fell on the old tiled roofs. They fell on the beautiful marbled streets. They fell on the squares and the clock towers. They fell on the fountains and the palaces. They fell on the schools and homes. They blasted through old stone walls and shook Sedgy's world. Ivana and her family had to leave Dubrovnik fast, very fast, and come to live in Ireland. In Ireland, they were given a new house in a glorious little town lying on the banks of the mythical, meandering, mucky River Boyne. And they liked this town enormously because the people were very kind and the music was marvellous and Ivana's school was great fun. And they made lots of friends and Ivana got a new doggy and everyone was very, very happy. Everyone except Sedgwick, because he lay all forgotten up in the attic in Ivana's old suitcase. So when Ivana was off growing up and going to discos and parties and getting married, where was he? Where was Sedgy? All cramped, all starving, all lonely and all squashed. And there he lay for 25 years. 25 years. Until one day, a little girl, Ivana's daughter, Molly, came up the attic stairs and found him. "Hooray!" shouted Sedgy when Molly opened up the old suitcase. "This is a great day." Poor Molly nearly collapsed with fright. Whatever she expected to find in that dusty old pink case, it wasn't a man. Whatever she thought she'd find, it wasn't a man in a top hat with a long blue coat and golden tassels on the shoulders. A man with a big pointy nose and a moustache that wound round and about his cheekbones. A man that stretched out his legs and stretched out his arms and danced because he was so happy to be let out. "Who are you?" asked Molly. And Sedgy explained, "I am your mother's imaginary friend. She took me with her to Ireland, but then forgot about me. And now you have released me, and you can see me, because imaginary friends pass down through families like tea sets, wedding rings, and bank debts." "Wow," said Molly, and fed her new friend some Tato crisps and a curly whirly, and made him the happiest imaginary friend that anyone had ever imagined. Now Sedgy was very curious about his new world, so Molly decided she'd take him to school. Sedgy was terribly excited to be out and about again. He really enjoyed the walk to school, and Molly was thrilled at the fact that nobody else could see him but her. The only problem was that Sedgwick fell in love with her teacher, called Mrs. Nivrin, who Sedgwick thought was really very pretty and very kind and lemony smelling, with hoopy earrings and a very soft voice, and who loves to tell stories about ancient places called Tara and Tir na Nog that were full of magic and battles and poets and druids. Yes, I fell in love with her straight away. Poor Mrs. Nivrin couldn't understand why her briefcase suddenly spilled over with rose petals every time she opened it, or why love hearts kept appearing on her whiteboard, or how kisses kept attacking her as she walked down the corridor. So Molly thought she better bring Sedgwick home. She brought him home at lunchtime. On the way home, they stopped to talk to Molly's great friend, Moo. Now, Moo was no ordinary friend. Moo is a bull, and Moo stands in the centre of Navan town with 4 strong stone men trying to hold him down. And everyone in Navan thinks that Moo is a statue, but Molly knows different. Molly knows that Moo can travel anywhere. Molly knows that Moo can fly. So Molly arranged for herself and Sedgwick to go on a trip that night with Moo through the stars. Have you ever travelled on a flying bull? Have you ever travelled through the stars? I have to tell you, it's rather sticky, said Sedgwick, as they zoomed through the Milky Way, and rather bumpy as they bounced from star to star, and rather whizzy because Moo has to travel very fast, because the stars are millions of years away, and if you don't keep up, you might get sucked back into yesterday. I believe it's all beautifully strange. When Molly and Sedgwick and Moo got back to Navan, Sedgwick asked Moo, might he be able to bring him back to Yugoslavia, to Dubrovnik, because he really missed it. Moo checked on his Google Maps and said, Moo. Oh, said Molly, Moo can't find it because it doesn't exist anymore. Doesn't exist? Doesn't exist? Whatever do you mean? It's my favourite place in the whole world. It's my home, and I miss it. Moo says it broke up after the war, but you're not to get all upset, Sedgwick, because Moo says he can fly back through time and bring you home. He can fly back through time? Of course he can. The only thing is, he needs directions, so we'll have to go and find the forgetful druid, and he'll tell us. The forgetful druid? Oh yes, he lives in Tara in the olden days, and he has maps. Oh well, that makes perfect sense. Oh, don't be worrying, Sedgwick. You're just tired now. I think we'll get you home. And with that, Moo dropped the 2 of them in through Molly's bedroom window, and Molly popped Sedgwick back into his suitcase with a pillow and her favourite teddy, and despite his confusion, Sedgwick slept for 2 whole days because he was exhausted. When Sedgwick woke up, it was Friday, and Molly said that Friday was a good day to travel to Tara in the olden days because she now had 2 days off school. So they started packing. Suddenly, the door to Molly's bedroom flung open, and there stood her cousin, Sive. Hey, Hello, Moll. How are you, doll? It's your cousin Sive that likes to duck and dive, and I'm ready to jive in this here hive. I'm up from Cork, waiting on the stork for the whole weekend, 'cause my mama's got to spend a few days in the coombe to relieve her womb of a brand new baby. Whoa, what a lady! Hang on a second. Who's that queer-looking fella in the suitcase? You can see him? Of course I can see him, and I can smell him too. Queer? Did you say queer? How come you can see him when he's my imaginary friend? You're what? Sure, that's nuts. Imaginary friends only live in stories. What's he doing in your bedroom with that god-awful moustache? God-awful what? It's all over your face. A total disgrace. Makes you look like a langer, wearing a hanger. Well, it almost descended into fisticuffs, except Molly interrupted with two curly whirlies and told her cousin Sive the whole story about Sedgy and about the plan to go to Tara in the olden days, and made her swear on her Nike leggings life that she wouldn't tell anyone. And so a deal was struck. Sive would say nothing if she could come too. And so that night Molly, Sedgy and Sive snuck out with Sedgy's little bag and made their way up to the Market Square and to Moo. God, this is very exciting altogether, said Sive. I've never had a go at riding a bull, and I've never sneaked out of the house after dark, and I've never visited anywhere that wasn't real or you couldn't get to by car. Oh my God, and will you look at Moo? That's a fine bull, that is. You're a fine bull, aren't you? And they were off. Now, Tara in the olden days is quite a sight to behold. Thick forests of oak trees and dark green fields. Floating mists above the fields with dewdrops singing to blades of grass. Humming rivers that chant and coo onto the banks and whistle to the trees and the whispering clouds. On and on the cacophony goes, a magic place of warriors and druids and goddesses and fairies and poets and healers and witches and hags and stories and stories and stories. Would you look at that? Said Sive. Have you ever seen the likes of them butterflies? They're the biggest butterflies I've ever seen. I'd like to catch one. And suddenly, silence. She was gone. Sive was gone. Gone and disappeared through a rose bush. Moo, said Moo. Molly had better find that forgetful druid fast. Forgetful lived in a place called Mick's Grave, a magical little clearing in the shape of a man, deep in the heart of Tara's forest. Forgetful was delighted but surprised to see his friends, because naturally he forgot that they were coming. And so Molly told him the whole story about Sedgy wanting to go home to a country that no longer existed, and about Sive disappearing, and he told them not to worry about anything, he'd fix it all. The forgetful druid then walked over to a circle of stones. Ta na clock The stones are magic, said Molly. And they certainly looked magic. Forgetful had a hawthorn stick, and he pointed it at the stones and made it follow them round and round, chanting and dancing as he went. Smoke started billowing out of the stones, and through the smoke Molly could see poor Sive in a dark, dark place, and she was sitting all by herself on a hard rock with her hands and feet tied with briars. Colleen bucked, said the old druid, because Sive had been captured by an evil man called on Far Dorica, who had tried to marry a young girl called Sive thousands of years ago, and had then turned her into a deer so that she could never escape him. Now the terrible man thought he could marry this new Sive, so our friends decided they better get to his cave fast before he spirited Molly's cousin away forever. They ran through Tara in the olden days as fast as they possibly could. But this part of Tara wasn't nice at all. It was windy and damp in half-light, with squidgy things and manky smells and screeching birds and biting wind and shuddering trees and nipping, stinging, pricking flies, and on top of that, pelting rain. Finally, they found on Far Dorica's cave. But they couldn't get inside it because a giant spider's web sealed the entrance. "Leave this to me. I am a Yugoslavian champion rope climber," said Sedgwick. And so he started climbing the spider's web. When he got to the top, he shone a torch into the cave, and Forgetful shouted, "Colleen and Will to and shot ta me," came a little voice from the back of the cave. And so Sedgwick Alexander Slevka the Third climbed in and asked the mice bats to cut the briars, and brought Molly's precious, if now silent, cousin back out into the light of day. Everyone danced with happiness, and Forgetful gave Sedgy his handkerchief so that Sedgy could wipe his face. Just then, when they thought they were safe, darkness descended, and a terrible thunderclap belted through the sky, with lightning bolts screaming down around them like knives. It was the Far Dorica coming back to claim his bride. Sedgy hurriedly flung Sive up onto Moo's back, and himself and Molly jumped up too. Forgetful began to battle it out with the evil man in spells and leaping and crashing sticks. Balls of fire began to surround them, but poor Moo rose up, up, up into the air and started flying her way back through the centuries, past Newgrange, past Brian Boru, Strongbow, Cruinniú Whale, the Buck of Kells, the Salmon of Knowledge, 1916, Maud Gone, Miggledy Higgins, and back to the lovely, safe, quiet town of Navan in the right here and now. "We're home," said Molly. "We're home." "We are," cried Sive. "But I'm not home," said Sedgy. "And we forgot to get the map." A tear rolled down Sedgy's cheek, so Molly took Forgetful's old handkerchief out to wipe it away. "Look! Would you look?" cried Sive. "We have it! We have the map!" And there it was, a magic map, right on the back of old Forgetful's hanky. And it was full of old Irish circles and dots and squiggles and half moons, and through them all there was a silver line pointing east, 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 through the stars and all the way back to magical kingdoms. Can you read it, Moo? Moo, said Moo. And Molly knew that her imaginary friend, even though she loved him, could go home. So she gave him a kiss. And then the bestest ever human friend put the bestest ever imaginary friend onto the back of the bestest ever flying magic bull, and they sailed off into the sky, riding right up over Ludlow Street and Spicer's Bakery and Ardmore Con, over the River Boyne, through the mists of time, back to Sedgy's beloved kingdom of Yugoslavia. The end.